Welcome back to the Houndsman XP podcast. And before we get too far down this rabbit trail, I want to make a clarification. A couple weeks ago, I said that Megan Perez had won the high-scoring walker, World Championship walker in the 2020 World Championship bench show, and that was incorrect. Megan was actually the 2020 United Kennel Club World Champion. So that correction is made. Congratulations, Megan, and I want to make that shout-out to you before we get too far down the road. But this week on the Houndsman XP podcast, we have got a hard-hunting houndsman from northwest Montana, Casey Stutzman. People in these parts say that Casey is one of the hardest hunting houndsmen that you would ever want to meet. A short story that I've heard about Casey is another houndsman in the area was hunting with him, and it was getting late one evening, and the wife of this other houndsman called Casey's wife and said, "Hey, have you heard from the guys?" And Casey's wife said, "You know, to be honest, if I don't hear from him in 2 to 3 days, I don't really start worrying." So Casey is a hard hunter. He is a student of pedigrees. He's a very astute breeder, and he's extreme performance in every aspect of the word, and it is our honor to have him on the podcast. Welcome to Houndsman XP, and thank you for your support this week, and thanks for listening to the podcast.
I'll start with just talking about like the first time I seen a wolf track, when it actually, and how that changed.
Do you remember the day, first
yeah.
time you saw one?
Yeah, it was probably in 2000, I suppose, 2001, somewhere in there. And I just remember we were out looking for a lion track or bobcat to run, and here's this. We're kind of downriver, quite a ways, looking for something, and here's this just great big dog track trailing down the road, just a single, and you just kind of thought, who on earth would be out here with a Saint Bernard? You know what I mean? It just made no sense. It didn't even really register, and we're like, I really think that's a wolf track, And it went from that, and then 2, 3, 4 years later to where every road, it just became so commonplace, and we always worried about, you'd hear about people having problems with wolves, and up in Canada and everything else, they've had issues with wolves forever with hounds, but the first time that we actually had an incident, we did everything we could all the time too. It changed how we did everything, and we were careful. We've always been careful, but the time when Julie got killed, we were it was snowing real hard one morning. We're just about to call it because there was just almost too much snow, too fresh, and I ended up bumping into Larry and Paul, and we decided to hit one more road just kind of for the heck of it, even though it was still snowing really hard, and it just dropped 10, 12 inches, something like that. And so we slid into up one more road, just kind of more because it was we all had the day off, and we just gonna give it one more go, and sure enough, here's a smoking fresh lion track. I mean, it was, I don't know, minutes old.
Yeah, minutes old.
And so kicked out a few hounds. I think Paul had a couple. I don't remember if you had a couple.
I had a couple.
Yeah, and I kicked out one dog, and of course I got a dog in the box, and she's just like a finished 3-4-year-old dog, and I didn't need to really run her that day, and everybody had a lot of dogs, and I had some other dogs in the box, but I thought, well, shoot, this thing's going to tree right here in the draw, so I just kind of kicked her out just to make her shut up more than anything. And so, and I think what happened there was, back to the same thing as that, there's too fresh of snow. We didn't know what, there could have been wolves tracks underneath that snow 6 hours ago. We don't know, but regardless, they kind of do live on that ridge, and the lion didn't stop. He kept on running and ran up over that ridge and kind of down the ridge a ways, and then dropped back down. And he took them right. What I believe happened is he took those dogs right up through the bed where all them wolves were bedded up, and they were all bedded up for that big snowstorm and just kind of laid up. And I really think the main pack of dogs, ran right through the middle of them, and they probably all stood up and looked at each other and said, "What the heck was that?" And I believe a loner wolf or one of the individuals took off after those main pack of dogs, because a couple of them got bit up in the hind end. But then, since Julie had gotten kicked out 10 minutes late, here she come 5 minutes later behind that main pack of dogs, or just a couple minutes later, and I think 3 of them got on her, because they had got on her from either end, and then one right in the middle. And then another dog of mine had gotten another single wolf, had taken off after him, and he was just running for his life. Called to him probably 1,200 yards away. He was all the way on a face straight across from me, and he heard me and ran to me like a shot out of a rifle. Looking, he was looking for me. And once he got to me, he's turned around growling, and he was chewed up in the hind end. And so Julie was the only one that actually got killed that day. But I think we got pretty lucky. That was all that happened, really.
Way lucky, yeah.
Yeah. So then we, of course, that was the end of trying to catch a cat that day, and we just rounded everybody up. But it had been a real odd deal. But taught us a lesson, obviously, that you can't trust. So hunting in snow conditions especially lots of fresh snow conditions, can be just as difficult to determine where them wolves are at sometimes.
Yeah.
As no snow, and another incident we had was another terrible deal. We had go ahead.
Let's just break in right there and welcome everybody to the Houndsman XP podcast and introduce our crowd today. So I've got Casey Stutzman from Marion, Montana, and you just heard a story about how wolves have changed the hunting culture and the practices of hunting with hounds in this corner of Montana, northwest Montana here, and appreciate you sharing that story with us. And we got a repeat. Larry Anderson's back on the mic. That's the other voice you heard coming in here. So I'm glad to have you on the podcast.
Yeah,
Casey, it's a pleasure. I mean, you've got a lot of history with hounds and how you the things you're doing with your hounds, and you're a student of the hounds and pedigrees and different stuff like that. That's why I wanted to have you on, and the work that you've done with the state of Montana and their mountain lion studies. That's going to be an interesting topic. But let's just talk a little bit. Let's let that conversation go about how the wolves have changed hunting for you and what you've seen over the years.
Oh, for sure. First off, too, thanks for letting me, come on. And it's, just being we are nobody special. We're just another guy that enjoys running dogs and gets obsessed with it. And, but it's always fun to sit around and talk hounds but back to the question about the wolves, it's truly changed everything we do. I mean, it's kind of run the full gamut with me emotionally, from hating them or wanting to quit, and then to almost retaliating and going the other way and say I'm going to hunt twice as hard just to prove I ain't going to quit. And,
right.
And it's kind of ended up somewhere in the middle where it's changed the number of dogs I keep around. It's changed who I hunt together, specifically in crosses, to make sure that I don't lose individuals together that are valuable in a particular corner of a bloodline. It's changed. You're definitely on edge, but I've also kind of come full circle into where I just hunt again. And I just say, it is going to be what it's going to be, and I'm still careful. We do everything you can, but you come to the point where after you've done everything you can, you still got to go and enjoy them.
Yeah.
And let the dogs be hounds and kick them loose and make them learn and let them do what they're meant to do, because otherwise it'll consume you.
Right.
It'll consume everything you do, and it becomes fearful. It takes the fun out of it, and there is that element, but if we weren't gonna turn loose a dog in a time when there was no risk involved, why we wouldn't go hunting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Lauren and I were having a conversation in a previous podcast about wolves, and she summed it up real well. She said, I'm not going to stop hunting because there's wolves in the woods. You know, these are our woods, and I can be here as much as they can. But I think there's a lot of spin-offs on what you just said. Things about bloodlines and how you. I think that's a good spin-off from that, because you have been a student of pedigrees and different stuff. So how long have you known this guy? I mean, Larry.
Larry and I, we just pass each other in the woods once in a while here and there, and
you don't like to hunt with him all the time either.
Well, we just didn't. Maybe just a couple loners is the problem, But then we finally, we did bump together and run a dog a few times, but literally we haven't really hunted together a lot, but we've appreciated a lot of the same things and a lot of the same pieces of country we hunt in, and both appreciate a good dog. So
Casey and I used to pick the nastiest country to hunt.
Yeah,
because we'd always have it to ourselves. And if there was another pickup track, I was like, oh, Casey's up here.
Yeah.
Because nobody really wanted to hunt the rough, crappy country. So him and I just load up. He'd go to load his box, I'd load mine, and we'd cross some pathing here and there and about everywhere.
Yeah.
But usually in places nobody else wanted to run.
Right.
It was nice because we always had it to ourselves.
Yeah, it might not be too smart, but we usually can find a way to get away by ourselves that way. So,
So, how long have you been hunting, Casey?
See, I got dogs in 97. So,
how old were you when you first got your?
I was just turned 15. So
turned 15, so you got into it early in life.
Yeah, I didn't grow up with with hounds. Grew up kind of farming and ranching, and that sort of life. So animal husbandry was natural to me, but the aspects of running hounds was pretty interesting. I was introduced to hounds through my. He became my brother-in-law when I married his sister-in-law, but her and I had been best friends all growing up, and so he had a couple hounds and was a younger fella getting into it at that time, and so him and I just kind of became good friends, and I just kind of got obsessed with it. Much to the dismay of my basketball coaches and everybody else, I kind of all that stuff went by the wayside, and I didn't play sports my senior year, and then just stuck with it, and we chased a lot of deer for a while, and and we never had enough money to buy tracking equipment, nothing, and
so what was it about hounds that made you give up high school sports, athletics, things like that? What can you put your finger on one thing that just made you think, man, this is what I want to do? I'd rather do this than play basketball or anything else.
I think a lot of it was I felt a duty to my dogs. I had a few pups, yearlings at that time, and it's like, these dogs need to be hunted. If I'm going to do this, they deserve for me to take the time and make them into what they can become and take them to the woods. And so I think it was more of like, I couldn't just let them sit around. Once I had decided, then I felt a great duty to work as hard as they do.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to do that, everything else kind of just took a back seat. But my and I hunted together there. My brother-in-law and we enjoyed hunting together. And like I said to you, it was, we were both learning and learned a lot of things the hard way. And he went on to have good dogs, and I did too. And we didn't, after a while, we didn't hunt together as much, but still enjoyed that same bond of running hounds. And
so it was kind of the blind leading the blind.
It was somewhat, and both of us, ended up being able to hunt with other fellas and learned a lot. And there was a few guys that let me tag along, when I was 18, 19 years old, was married really young and started having children not long after that. And so life was busy, but we just kept keeping on. Tried everything under the sun as far as dogs were concerned.
Like what?
Oh, just different crossbred dogs, and picked up, this and that and the other thing, and had some great cross dogs, and had red dogs and blue tick walker dogs. And
so, what point did you become a student of pedigrees and things like that? When did that all click for you? Because you've been pretty true to a couple breeds and lines.
I got my first dogs I got off of Jim Harrell, and he had some dogs that came from Del Cameron, and so I was pretty early in when he had really just had those dogs, just started down that particular road. He's been faithful to those Cameron dogs, and so I ended up with those to start with, and didn't really, to a degree, I knew what I had. I was fortunate, started out with some really great dogs that just kind of did it in spite of me, and always felt blessed to have started with some really good hard hunting dogs. But but to a degree, I always kind of felt like there's some other silver bullet out there, and I just really wanted to try a lot of different things. It wasn't so much that I didn't appreciate what I had, but I really wanted to know for sure that what I had was what I wanted to keep for the long haul. I didn't want to second guess myself, knowing that I had some average stuff. And what I found through that is there's just a lot of good dogs out there, and if you hunt hard and you put a lot into them, you'll get a lot out of them. But the consistency that I found in that particular bloodline is the reason I stuck with those dogs. And it took, Jim he's a really good friend of mine, and we're still, some of the closest friends to this day. But we've worked together for 10, 12 years also, and seen each other every day. So it's so we have a close relationship. But it was probably, 8, 10 years after I had those first dogs. He's like, "Are you done dinking off, screwing around with all those other crossbred mutts? And you gonna keep some dogs that you can actually help me out here in this program?" Because And I was already kind of somewhat dialed in on those particular genetics and what I was very interested, let's put it that way, even before I was breeding. So I was always pestering Jim about different dogs, and he's like, "Man, you seem to enjoy this as much as more than I do. Why don't you, help me out here?" And so I've been fortunate to get good dogs off of Jim for a lot of years, and so that was kind of how I got started into that line of blue dogs that I got. And
one thing I've noticed about the best houndsmen, there's a couple common factors. One is they hunt a lot, they hunt smart, and it doesn't seem like there's anything in their life that they do halfway. Just like you said, you hunt hard. The harder you hunt, the better dogs you're going to have. Yeah. But you're kind of extreme in a lot of, if I was just fortunate enough to come up to your place and see the cabin that you're building and stuff.
Right.
And the log scribes and stuff are perfect. And, everything around your place is you keep it, all your collars are lined up and you've got everything lined out. So it's apparent from meeting you and talking to you and stuff and seeing the way you live your life that you're pretty extreme on a lot of things.
Well, kind of, jack of all trades, master of nothing, I would say, but I do enjoy a lot of different things. I enjoy learning, and yeah, that is the goal. You try to, do your very best at whatever is in front of you.
Mm-hmm. How important do you think learning is for houndsmen?
Oh, it's everything. I think we constantly are learning, and I've been just fortunate to meet a lot of great guys and picked up little bits in this. And so I guess I do also just want to reiterate, man, I just don't I don't think I'm anybody special.
Yeah.
But that's my biggest joy. That's why, like, I've kind of always been a loner to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Had a few guys that we hunted together fairly steady off and on for periods of time, especially when they were getting into it or whatever. And then they ended up having great dogs, and they went on and did their own thing, which was good. I've always had a lot of puppies around, and I've always got youngsters.
Yeah.
And so I tended to always, more than anything, I don't want to go and wreck your day by having my puppies screw up. But anytime I could get a day to go and hunt with somebody else, like Larry or, Scott Olson or Jim Harrell or some of these guys that we didn't hunt with them a lot, but man, you can pick up an awful lot, and starting from nothing, you really did that. And then, and then reading good books and studying that aspect of it. I think it's all important to try to glean whatever you can from whoever you're around. And sometimes that's what not to do, maybe,
Yeah.
We've all met that guy. But I think if you don't set the bar high for your dogs and for yourself, then you're gonna just always be right there in the middle somewhere.
Yeah. I've seen that in coon hunters in the East. I've seen it in everywhere in between, houndsmen in the West. And yeah, we do it because we like to be out there and we just love the mountains and stuff.
Yeah.
But even as much as I love it, I still don't want to be embarrassed by my hounds. And
right.
I've kind of changed my attitude a little bit just because I've got a couple right now that are kind of spun out and crazy.
Yeah.
And
they're a little bit spun out.
Yeah, but Larry's whole pack's spun out. So
they are.
They're pretty wound.
But ADHD or something.
Yeah. But it's in the past. If I was turning a hound loose, I wanted it to be as good as anything that was it was being hunted with.
Yeah.
And even to the individual hound, each individual hound. I don't. I try not to keep stuff that's going to set me back.
Yeah.
And coon hunting in the East is a lot different than Western houndsmen. The way you hunt out here. A lot of times, I'm hunting single dogs at night by themselves in Indiana. And but still, I mean, if you decide you're going to take a couple, you don't want one of your dogs. If you're chasing dogs that are out trashing and doing all that stuff, that's time that you're not hunting.
Yeah, and it's taken away from what they could be learning.
Yeah.
I think, there's a lot of times out west here, guys that hunt by themselves, and there's a lot of guys that hunt with a lot of other people. But a lot of times it can be easy to not have something to compare your own dogs against. It's easy to say, oh, we got beat by that, we didn't catch that track today or whatever. Nobody else would have.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean they wouldn't have. Maybe the next guy coming up would have. Maybe my dogs that are dead and gone would have caught that same track. But you always have to be really honest about what you have right in front of you right now, I think. And but it's kind of I think always been, it's a neat thing about the competition world is that there's dogs that are kind of trying to be measured up against all these other dogs. And so there becomes these standards and there becomes, you'll know in a real hurry if what you got is junk. Where out here, if you're just hunting by yourself all the time, you might think your dogs are pretty good, but they might be just not, so, so it's good to, to go listen to somebody else's dog's trail for once in a while and really measure up and be honest that way so that you know that what you're doing. And the other sense of that is if they're pleasing you, that's enough too.
Right.
You can be hypercritical of your pack, and I kind of boundary around that probably more often than I ought to.
I do too.
Yeah. And they got to be able just to be a dog and make mistakes once in a while. And,
right.
And, and I, but you can't also make make excuses for them all the time either.
Right.
So, my perception of that though is it's important to, find that balance. You're always seeking that balance, but I kind of went through phases where I was pretty sure I had the best around and wanted everybody to know about it. And, and then then I went through seasons where those dogs were dead and gone, and I was starting over, and or hunting a pile of youngsters, and maybe they were going to be good, but they weren't yet. And if you're basing your own success on everybody else's opinion of your dogs, you're that's not right either. But they better be. But I think there is value in going and hunting with somebody else once in a while, and maybe not even dumping your own dogs, letting their pack run a race, and then you take the next track.
Yeah,
because you don't get that dynamic of mixed dogs getting dumped together and having weird stuff happen, which is hard to do typically. If you're out with somebody else, you both dump a few. And you end up
Sometimes I just like to jump in with other people and just watch their dogs go, and not turn a dog out and just see how their program works, or see how their dogs just excel, or what they do. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, a lot of times I'll just run mine into the ground, and they can't be hunting.
Yep.
But I'd still want to go in the woods, even though my dogs can't. So I'll just invite myself to jump in with somebody else and maybe learn something. Or
and somebody else might be seeing something that you're not when they're listening to your pack of hounds, going, that dog up there, it seems like to me he's, and you're like, I didn't really see it that way, because maybe in your own mind you had a different perception of that individual. And but I do also think it's important that as a human and as a person, my own value isn't in my dog. That's an awful burden for those dogs to bear.
Right.
And and then when they fail, so the competitive side of it, I think, is great, because I think it drives you towards perfection, and it drives you for a high standard. But I think as people, you have to, you just have to be able to be honest and recognize that you don't have the best right to now. But that doesn't mean that me as a person, I'm not a good hunter, or that I'm not giving it my all, or that tomorrow these same dogs might not excel and do better.
Right.
And so if you can kind of separate those emotions from,
I think a little bit. Some of the houndsmen that have been in it for a long time and have established their own bloodlines, I see two different camps. One is they think that their whole identity is, and their values and their standards are defined on what type of dog they're hunting.
Yeah.
And then there's another camp of guys that are like, they're doing the best they can do today.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep hunting them. I'm going to keep, I've still got these high standards, but where they're more realistic about it, and they're not prideful about it. They understand that every dog's going to have a bad day, I see two different camps there from some of the guys that have been in it for a long time, and when you start trying to compare what you've got to everybody else, man, that can be a Pandora's box, because what somebody else likes may not be what you like.
Yeah.
And so, but I've also, after you've been a houndsman for a while, what a good dog is.
Yeah.
And you brought up competition hunting. And that's interesting because, I got to the point where I kind of felt like that I knew what a good hound was, and I didn't need the approval of a registry to tell me that I had a good dog.
Sure.
It's a deal where what a good dog is. So what do I need to go spend my money for them to tell me that I've got a good dog so that I can go out and brag or breed or whatever. It's a different world for, competition hunting versus big game hunting. We'd talked, and I've talked to UKC about setting up a hunt test for big game houndsmen that can get their pack certified, like a 4-dog pack or whatever, and that's not a dead issue yet. We're just looking for people to jump on board with that, right. And I think that'd be kind of cool, where you have a rep for the region, and it's like, hey, I've got a pretty decent group of dogs here, pack of dogs here. I'd like to maybe get them certified. Not that they need it, but I don't know. It might be something that could get some traction someday.
Yeah.
I don't know.
For sure.
Because you're talking about the same thing that drives guys to go to the PKC and the UKC hunt back home.
Yeah.
I want to compare my dogs to what everybody else has got.
Yeah.
That's what makes that wheel turn.
Yeah, and I think it's just important in maintaining, knowing that you're still doing things right if you're breeding dogs, and they need to. If you're only staring at your own dogs for the rest of your life, you really won't know.
That's exactly right, and that's the flip side to what I said. Even though I know what a good dog is, sometimes, that's not an excuse. If you can't walk into a clubhouse back east and say, I got the best dog here, but I'm not entering him tonight.
Right.
That has no traction either. Yeah. So,
but there also is a sense too with which, and I wanted to hit on that. You were talking about the pride aspect. There's also guys out there, and I mean, I can understand that myself. Is I had this mixed up bunch of mutts, and it's like, well, I must be something special because I don't need all them high powered, well-bred dogs, and I catch everything on the mountain, and so there's and I do it a bunch of pound dogs, and so there can be arrogance both directions, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a lot of humility that's I think important in running hounds. For one, they're the ones doing all the work, for crying out loud. But two, also there's lots of men that came before you and that allowed me to have what I have today. And so, I get to reap the benefits of a lot of other people's work for the most part. Here down the road we'll see if what I've contributed to it is bettered it or kept it the same or lost it. So I say that not to just to make that point that there's a lot of guys that don't want that high powered dog they paid money for because it really makes me look better if I can do it with nothing. So
well, you hit on something right there. Nobody has the right to drive their stake in the ground and say, I created all of this.
Yeah.
I don't know the first guy that ever caught a lion with a hound.
Right.
Chucking a spear at it, or who was the first guy that figured out that you could use a dog? There's pictures of them drawn on cave walls, but we don't know who they are. Yeah. And we've just, as humans, we've developed those skills over time, and it's like mile markers in the road as you go. People have, or it's like the when you drive down the Salmon and you see the Lewis and Clark signs, historical markers.
Right.
They did this at this point, and I think we could do that with our houndsmen.
Yeah.
I know Nance bred walkers in the West have made an impact in the big game world. Lester Nance was a coon hunter from Indiana.
Sure.
White River King was the first walker, and look what that. But I don't know that Lester Nance. He lived in Indiana his whole life.
Yep.
So that's a historical marker in our houndsmen.
No, absolutely, and so I think it's I just consider it kind of a great honor to have been able to start with some clean lines that consistently reproduce what I like. And they're not always for everybody, and to each his own, and that's okay. I think that's another part in the hound world that's important, that we all say that it's all right not to appreciate the same things. And even Larry and I, our dogs aren't a lot alike. I mean, some ways they are, obviously, but I had one of his that they had a few issues that just were, to me, it bothered me. That dog went on to be probably one of the finest dogs, bear catching dogs up in Canada, and I mean, tremendous dog. And I passed on that dog, and it's just because he had a few quirks that to me just drove me nuts, and that's not a bad thing, and it doesn't mean that I should have necessarily kept that dog. And Larry's had a few of these dogs, and there's attributes in them that drive him nuts, and so it's okay. Yeah. I can look at his dogs and appreciate his dogs for what they are, and I think he'd say the same thing about me, but it doesn't necessarily. And there's individuals.
Let's see if you'll say the same thing. Yeah. What do you think? You got anything to say?
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
And all the houndsmen I've ever met, he hunts the hardest.
Yeah.
Of anybody.
Yep.
20 years. He's
hunts hard.
He hunts hard. Harder than anybody I've ever met.
So you cut timber, and then in the wintertime you kind of slack off of that and then go full bore.
Yeah, so my story, I've built houses for a lot of years.
Right.
Right out of high school, I started cutting timber, and that's what I wanted to do. But kind of realized pretty close off the bat that I needed to have some other skill sets as well. Just because of the industry, especially around here, wasn't too strong, but chased helicopters for a while, falling trees, and then got to work in doing construction and enjoyed that, learned a lot, and had my own outfit and did really well for a lot of years doing that, and it still could be if I wanted to. But
so you were one of those guys that was cutting timber for the helicopters coming in and.
Yeah, I didn't saw for the helicopters for a lot of years, but off and on, combined probably a couple of years out.
Those are some crazy videos. I've watched those on YouTube, and man, that's some crazy stuff right there. Guys sitting down and seeing the helicopter coming. Guy sharpens a chain in like 30 seconds. I don't even know how he did it. He's just getting ready to knock the next tree down, and because he can see that. And that helicopter's not going to sit there and wait for him to sharpen his saw.
Yeah, it was always a ride. I called it as the rotor turns. There's always a lot of drama involved. There was always, it was hurry up and wait kind of work, and at times it was boom and bust. It was good pay, and then and then there's times when you move to 4 jobs in 3 weeks, and you just spent all your money traveling, and just because things get shut down. But kind of high stakes jobs, but. Enjoyed the work, and obviously, there's something about cutting timber that anybody who's ever done it will tell you. It just gets in your blood. It's you ask yourself why. It's usually wet and cold or frying hot or it's always extremes, but you get to be out in the woods and
which takes us back to that extreme lifestyle. Casey Stutzman, I'm going to cut trees for helicopters. Sure. I'm going to do this. I'm going to hunt the best dogs I can. I'm going to hunt 200 days this year, whatever it is,
And we went to doing the construction and kind of bounced back and forth. Anytime I got slow, I'd go back to falling timber, but spent most of my life doing construction and all phases of that.
Yeah.
And got to where just
and the houses you built, they weren't shacks.
No, we've been fortunate. We got to this area has a lot of high-end construction, and so it was challenging. It was enjoyable. There's always a lot of problems to solve and
right.
Challenging work, and kind of got into the timber framing side of things, and so did a lot of Morse 10 timber framing and enjoyed that, and enjoyed round log and stuff like that. So, but whatever paid the bills, kind of too. It was, we been able to do a little everything. And I grew up, my dad was a plumber, so I grew up on job sites ever since I was a little kid.
Right.
And so I always watched them old guys slinging big hammers, and that looked pretty cool. But I got a good awareness of all the things that go into building a house, I think, as a fairly young kid.
Yeah.
And that really benefited me later on in life, knowing everybody's task and what it takes for each person and being able to lay things out to where everybody else can benefit and get done quick. And so anyway, we moved on to that. And then I've been trying to move actually out of Montana here for a few years. We spent a lot of time and looked at moving to Idaho quite a few different times, and just doors kept kind of closing, and that was okay too. But I was down in Utah here a couple of years ago and built a couple houses down there, actually log homes, and that was kind of an adventure. We looked at trying to buy property down there, nothing seemed to work out, and I ended up back home. And when I through that process down there, though, it was pretty neat just because I was fortunate enough to get to hunt a lot while I was down there, and it was a good learning experience, and it was got to meet some different folks, see a different way of hound life for sure,
right.
And that was so anyway, it was a great experience, but ended up coming back up here, and they were needing help sawing again, so this was a couple of years ago, so it was 3 years ago, so I've been back up here falling timber ever since. And then that outfit I work for, I do a lot of fabrication and welding and stuff for them. They seem to break a lot of stuff, so I keep fixing it.
So when you moved back up here, you got involved with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks.
Yeah, so this was here. They've been doing the state had been doing a lot of study work and trying to develop a new mountain lion management program for the state. And a lot of that all came back to a lot of work that
I want to break this down to the most simple, because there's people back east or people in Australia that will not understand what the purpose of this is.
Sure.
So I really want to break it down to the lowest levels first.
Yep.
And talk about some of that stuff. Like, I'll just ask you, what's the purpose of doing a mountain lion study?
So there's lots of different reasons that different studies will take place, and I can't speak to a lot of that. But this particular project was to determine mountain lion densities. Mm-hmm. And to be able to accurately build a management program. In other words, however many animals need to be removed from a particular area, so they could do that with some level of accuracy, not just guessing what they have on the landscape. And that's always been a challenge. They're tough animals to monitor. They're tough animals to estimate. You talk to one crew, they say there's 1 billion of them, and you talk to the next, and they say there's none. And so there's just a lot of varying opinions, and so the biologists are constantly trying to keep their finger on the pulse of truly what's going on. Mm-hmm. And they do that a number of ways, but there's never been like real consistent science to be able to do it. It's always they're always just trying to feel out the pulse of numbers. And so this particular study and the gal who put together basically the study method, and there's probably other people involved, but Kelly Prophet did the work on that. They, to my knowledge, basically they took several years and used this study method down in the central western part of the state, and used houndsmen to collect DNA sample data through kind of just a real structured method of working their way through country and
through sections, through regions of the Montana.
Yep. And so there's actually a particular study area. They go in and they sample basically everything they can find within that area, and there's with a structured way of going about it. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of other stuff built into these algorithms that way smarter people than me, know how. I can't even really explain all of that part of it, but they're
probably taking the data that you're gathering and comparing it with data that on other tests and studies that they're doing, like hair samples. They're setting up bait stations or going to kill sites and collecting DNA there, and then they're comparing it to yours and seeing how far away did you catch this mountain lion from this known location that we got a DNA sample at this kill site, and now Casey Stutzman is catching this lion 12 miles away or 30 miles away.
Yeah, I'm sure they do put any other information they get from anything else, but for the most part, this particular study, it's a capture-recapture method, and what they're doing is the amount of times, and they take into account the areas, and then they can check genetic diversity amongst a group, and so obviously they take samples too out of any animals that get harvested in that study area and around that study area to also take those animals out of the equation. And like I said, the actual science aspect of it is not my perfect understanding, but they've worked alongside of us as houndsmen, which I have to say that in the state of Montana, we've had an excellent relationship with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in regards to our mountain lion management stuff. they truly are friends of the houndsmen. And Jim Williams up here in Region 1, you know, you don't have to talk to him long to see that he has a high regard for houndsmen, and he's, you know, so that we've been fortunate, even statewide, to have a good working relationship, and a lot of that's through the use of houndsmen for doing study work, and I would say that's all over the place. But anyway, they used houndsmen down in that portion, and they kind of tested out this study model to see how effective it was and how accurate it was, and so they spent a lot of time and effort to kind of prove out that this was going to be a good way to study mountain lions. And there was quite a few different houndsmen, really good houndsmen involved in that project. And Cody and Ray Henson down there out of Phillipsburg, they were heavily involved in that whole period of time as well. And they're involved in this now. But to give a reference on the Montana's mountain lion management program now, as a state, we've really restructured even the way that we look at managing lions. So they're looking at it in regards to ecoregions, basically areas that kind of have similar habitat support, you know, so rather than breaking it down like in a section from the north of the highway and east of the river, you know, it's more broken down now into areas that follow similar habitat. And so the three major mountain lion regions are just ecoregion 1, 2, and 3 in the state. And so last year was the first year of being able to enter in, and we started up in Region 1, and which is up here in the north corner. And I was able to get involved in this project. It was there's 5 or 6 houndsmen that were contracted to do this DNA collection, essentially. And so I was fortunate enough to be one of those fellas. And this year I kind of had it really good just because it was my own stomping grounds. And so I was able to hunt in a lot of my own favorite holes, you know.
Right.
And so that was a pretty neat deal. But the plan for the state then is going to be there'll be 2 areas within ecoregion 1, and then 2 in Region 2, and 2 in Region 3, which is in the south corner of the state, southwest. And it'll rotate through those areas, and then they're able to go back into those areas, you know, another year, do the same type of work, and be able to take their baseline data that they get off the first time, and compare that with years, you know, subsequent years. And
so that's where the recapture comes in. You go in the first time and you collect data. You come back later and you see if you're catching the same lions.
Correct. And by no means quote me as far as being an expert in that, but the recapture also, when we go through a study area, we go through it all one time, then we go back through it all again, and you'll and possibly even a third time if time allows.
During the same year.
Okay. And so a lot of those individuals, what we're maybe getting a sample out of, might be sampled duplicate times.
Okay.
All that kind of plays into the model, and they're able to determine that, you know, they obviously know that was one individual, even though it was 3 samples.
Sure.
Right? That's the whole point of the DNA thing, and. But they can also see where it was at during December and where it was at in February and where it was at in April. You know,
right.
So there's the ability.
Did it follow this herd of deer down? Did it?
Yeah.
You know, did it move up to this region?
You know, and
so what is specifically is your role with it? Let's talk about what the people that are contracted to do this study, but then your specific role with it.
Yeah.
As well.
So and then that's just me. I'm just I get to just be a houndsman. I work. Basically just contracted to be able to collect samples. And so I'm not sure how many contracts they're writing this year, but there's quite a few. You know, there's several people, and different people have more time than others and get to hunt more than others, and there's some seniority and priority based on some of that. But really great people, very good houndsmen. You know, Cody and Ray are awesome. They husband and wife team, and keep black and tans, keep some excellent dogs around, and So, quite a few different houndsmen from around the state. And so then we're all kind of hunting areas that aren't familiar to us too, for the most part, year after year. And
that's a pretty good test for your hounds, right?
It really is, and it's been a side of actually doing this that surprised me. But even in my own backyard, I was forced to go hunt all the corners that I'd just never really been in, because you'll end up running a track on the way there twice, if you just don't head there and go hunt that area. And so it really stretched me and made me, I've never really been afraid of trying new places, but I enjoyed that aspect of seeing it in a different way and kind of being forced to go look in new corners and figure out where the wolves are, what they're doing, figure out how we can do it. And this last year, our snow conditions were really poor.
They were terrible here last year.
Yeah. So that kind of made it for a challenge. But we were fortunate. We were able to catch a lot of cats, and then towards the end of the year when there was nothing, they just said, as long as you guys keep catching stuff, then you guys can keep on hunting. And if it gets bad and you don't think it's worth your time, obviously we're not trying to beat our heads in the wall, but we were fortunate dogs kept coming up with tracks and kept catching cats, and so we really actually finished out the season really well. It was it was really enjoyable. I just say to anybody who gets a chance to do that kind of work, man.
So how many lines? Cool. How many lines do you think you sampled last year?
Me personally, I think I probably sampled 32 or something like that.
Mm-hmm. How many total in the study?
I think on the whole study, you put me on the spot. I don't know if I've even seen all that data, but I'm thinking it was about 80.
Mm-hmm. And how big of an area?
Boy, it's big. I'm trying to remember the exact size of it, but man, you sure can't cover it all by yourself. Let's put it that way.
Right.
I'm thinking it's like, is it I think it's 100 square miles.
Wow.
Something like that. I might be wrong on that. I'd have to look again. Each specific area it's all gridded out and was busted into, I think, 5 kilometer squares, and so you're targeting a specific unit or grid cell each day, and the surrounding cells to some degree, but it's kind of you're kind of targeting it in a pretty organized fashion.
Right. Scientists always have to break down stuff into kilometers in the metric system.
Yeah, they definitely are believers in the metric system, which that's a topic for another day, I guess. But
that's a whole different.
Dumb loggers like me, they just, as long as there's lines on a map, I can follow that, I guess.
Yeah.
But
they're trying to get houndsmen to convert over to the metric system. It's like, tell me the yards, or tell me my dog's in there 1,200 yards, or I need to drive 3 miles down the road. When they start. I want you to drive 3.5 kilometers down this road. Then you got to get out Google and hope you have cell phone coverage so you can convert it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But that work, man, it's been really, really neat. And like I said, I feel fortunate to be able to be a part of it. And I'd look forward to, hopefully being a part of that, for years to come. And like I said, it's different. And I mean, I can catch a lot more critters not doing study work. Let's put it that way. But
I was going to ask you. So you're headed out to do the study work, and you come across a smoking hot bobcat track. Do you turn loose on it?
Oh, that's the worst part of it, man. No, you got to go get the work done.
Is that right?
So, and I can say that I had a couple days when I'd find a smoking fresh bobcat track, and I'd go get all my cells done, catch a line down there, and about 5 o'clock at night coming home, I might kick loose on that same track, and because I can't let that go to waste, but that track. But no, there's and the other thing is you're proving out a lot of country that doesn't have cats in it. So you spend a lot of days snowmobiling and covering real estate that is, that full well that has nothing in it, hasn't had anything in it for the last 2 months, But that's part of the work that needs done is you need to go and prove out that it doesn't have anything in it, and that's as important as the data that it does. So, there's a lot of days like that when that's just how it is. But it's like I said, felt fortunate to be a part of it, and obviously it gets me out in the brush.
Yeah. Let's talk about
cool.
the dogs you're using to do this, because that's kind of the thing that talked to you very long, and you've got a definite passion for the lines of dogs. You're a student of pedigrees and things like that. If you ask anybody in this valley, they'll tell you if you want to know about bloodlines and things like that, then you need to talk to Casey.
Well, that's probably a little but yeah, I have been through the blue ticks, been involved with those camera-bred dogs through Jim Harrell and some other shirt-tail connections that I've developed through Jim, and there's quite a few guys keeping those bloodlines going. There's a lot of different guys that are doing it for different reasons and different ways, but there's a lot of that blood out there. So I've still got the blue dogs, and then here about 8 years ago, I met a fella that through the blue ticks, he's raised the blue ticks for his whole life, and that's how we got connected, and he was a real historian and learned a ton from him, and he had these old Walker dogs sitting out back too, and so he and I knew his standards for blue ticks, and I knew what I'm like, surely. So I was really curious about these Walker dogs, and was fortunate enough to get to hunt with some of them, and man, it was just a clean gene pool of Walker dogs that were really similar to the type of hound that these blue dogs were. They're cold nosed and
describe them. Describe the blue ticks.
So I'd say in this line of blue ticks, which people know them as the camera-bred dogs, but going further back, they're Sebastian's Little Blue, I'd say, is probably the most influential in the modern day Camerons.
And where did that dog come from? For those that don't know?
Julius Sebastian had those dogs, but all that bloodline goes back to Elbert Vaughn, and so that being said is Elbert Vaughn ended up sending out a lot of dogs that made really good big game dogs. Real gritty, tough, catch the last, no quit style of big game hounds, and there's a lot of guys that took those bloodlines and mixed them and did different things, different directions. But this specific line, was really built off of that, and now so Sebastian and others would know a lot more about those dogs specifically, but was a similar, came from Elbert Vaughn, and those by way of a few guys there in Idaho. Dale Cameron ended up with some of those dogs, and he really bred real tight to some sons out of Sebastian's Little Blue, and going back to some blood from John Henneman. That was Sebastian blood that Henneman had at that time, and but there's a lot of other guys involved there in that in the formation of those dogs, and so. But as a type, the dogs that we keep, I'd say, are just pretty dang durable dogs. Dogs that you can hunt day after day after day. That's an important thing to us. So tough feet and just no quit. Sometimes that even borderlines on a little light on brains, I would say. Now that's maybe not being nice to those fellas that have kept those dogs for years, but I mean those dogs have to be just goers. They can't be, So, dog knows that when they're sore and tired, they should find a hole to lay down for a day. Why? That might be a good sign of intelligence right there. But so the blue ticks, going back to that, we look for cold nose, ball mouths, and tough feet and no quit. That's probably that style of dog. And so with that said about the blue dogs, and that fella Mr. Hatter there, he kept these line of Walker dogs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they met the same category. You know, they're tough. They didn't have quit. They had, you know, they were athletes, and I'd say that about the Cameron dogs is they're good looking dogs. They're good looking, and they're athletes, and they look like a hound, you know, and that matters to us too. But the Walker dogs were the same way: cold nose, no quit, durable and tough and tough minded, and looked like a hound and sounded like a ball mouth hound ought to, and so anyway, I was fortunate enough to get some of those dogs off of him, and like I didn't really need to keep two bloodlines going. It's excessive in a lot of ways, but when I found a really clean strain of dogs there that were producing their likeness, and were able to, and those dogs were producing what I liked and consistently, and in the Walker bloodline, at least around this area, it's pretty tough to find good, strong, hard, tough, cold nose Walker dogs that aren't bent towards either slick treeing or running to where they don't tree well. You know, this finding a good accurate dog that in our country, you know, we want accuracy. We don't, you know, it's a big enough country, and it's not the biggest country by any means, but it's big enough country. You don't want to be hiking a few miles into open trees. And so
I think a lot of people back east don't understand the importance of the accuracy on a Casey because they haven't experienced it. But some of these ponderosas and stuff out here are 300 feet tall.
Yeah, and we got a lot of brushy, you know, spruce and subalpine fir trees, and you get a bobcat 100 feet in there.
Mistletoe firs.
Yeah, and so, and I'm not saying that, but treeing ability is important to us, you know, because a lot of times too, some of this country gets really deep snow, and it's not so much that's that far, but it takes you forever to get there.
Yeah,
it's just you know, so you need dogs that stay put, and you definitely want there to be game in it when you're there. So what I'd say about that is a lot of these dogs, not all of them by any means, but quite a few of them take quite a bit of game to where they really tree hard. They're pretty track-minded dogs, and personally, I kind of like it that way. I always get kind of worried when I see those puppies that just slam and slobber on the first tree they ever get to. It's like I expect to see, you know, some of those might be a little bent that direction.
But you can't have good Facebook videos if you don't have one of those dogs.
And it don't work for everybody because not everybody has the ability to put a lot of trees in front of a yearling pup. And they just can't stand the fact that pup left 3 or 4 of the first trees and is trailing on the second track over here on the other side of the mountain. And he might not even locate that one. And I might spend the rest of the day looking for that pup that trailed 3 individuals and never stayed at any one of those trees, you know. And that's frustrating to a lot of guys. And especially if you got a buddy with you and he doesn't want to be dinking around with that. So
it's always harder when it's not your dog.
Yeah, and so for him to sit in the pickup all night while you're trying to track down that pup, which, you know, but given some time, and there's things you can probably do to speed some of that up, you know, as far as getting those dogs to tree a little younger and stuff. But and like I said, and they're not all like that. I mean, they got plenty of them that tree right off the bat the first time. But it's just a matter of it just depends a lot on the circumstance and that particular individual tree and how easy it was to locate.
Right.
And, you know, just how those pups will put things together at different speeds based on their own experiences. But I personally have kind of gotten to where I don't worry about it too much, you know, and I just keep running them. And yeah, I'm going to have to hike to the top of the mountain in the dark a few times and pick that pup up. But those are always the ones that are the ones I always, you know, when they're 6-8 years old and they're just irreplaceable, you know.
Yeah.
That's been my own experience.
Wow. So you had said something about what you look for, and you talked a lot about different attributes and traits. So if you, for some reason, let's say that all your dogs were raptured and no longer existed, but you still wanted to, what would Casey Stutzman go out and look for in a hound to replace what you've got right now? What are those attributes that are they got to be there. They don't stay here.
I just would say, I mean, above everything else, I'd say brains. I mean, I kind of didn't even hit on that because I almost feel like that's like a prerequisite no matter what. Like, so intelligence, but I would just look at dogs that are durable and that hunt as hard as I want to. You know, I don't like quitters, and I'm kind of vain. They better be good looking. You know.
Yeah.
I've hunted a lot of dogs that were, that weren't maybe the top looking dogs that were tremendous, but there's a lot of great looking dogs that get it done the right way. And so if I don't have to settle, I sure won't.
Right.
See, that's the difference between Casey and I. I don't mind an ugly dog as long as it gives its all every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I don't, like I said, that vanity, I've passed up on some good dogs, and I've sold some dogs that probably would have been smart to keep around for ours.
I'm kind of like that too, really. I mean, I like a good-looking dog.
Yeah.
And we always joke around. We've said it on this podcast before. There's no sense in hunting an ugly dog.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, I think we all three of us understand that's not the deal breaker.
Yeah. Talking back to that though, learning from other fellas and getting better and trying to develop it. My own dogs, striking ability has been pretty, really been a game changer for me in being able to put a lot more miles on dogs and cover a lot more country that before maybe I was roading through country or free casting through country. And so rigging ability, accuracy and durability, but everybody wants a cold nose, I rarely do I get people calling up looking for a dog that's hotter nosed, and it seems like everybody's trying to put a little more nose into
why
what
is
they have.
Why is a cold nose so important for this area that you're hunting? Explain that one.
Well, this area,
because if you bring a cold nose to my area, we're not out there to build campfires and roast hot dogs. We want to be there to treat coons, and sometimes that if you get a dog that wants to go out and run every track it comes across, you're spending a lot of time that you're not looking at coons. Yeah. Especially when you're competition hunting. Yeah. If you're breeding a line of dogs and your goal is to win competition hunts, a dog that buries its nose in the ground and spends an hour to tree one raccoon isn't going to get your picture taken.
Yep. For us, some people don't like it here. And we have if you just hunt easy days here, there's a lot of really good conditioned days to cat hunt here. Obviously, so speaking to Montana, we don't really have summer seasons that we can pursue anything, but we have a winter season for bobcat and lion. And that winter season goes from December to the middle of April. And so for the most part during those months, especially in northwest Montana, we have pretty darn good cat hunting conditions most years. Not every day, but within that period of time, you'll have a lot of really good days. Mm-hmm. And so if you just hunt good, fresh snow conditions, you really don't need a tremendous nose. But if you hunt every day and you hunt, we have a lot of transitional days where there's a lot of ice and then snow and freeze and thaw and freeze and thaw. And that's where, where those dogs that are willing to really grind and work hard and handle a bad track are going to get something caught for you on those days. Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, it's kind of interesting because depending on who you talk to, they may or may not want or need a cold nose. It just depends on their hunting style. The guys that need good cold nose, I talk to all the time, are usually outfitters. They're guys that have to get it done this week no matter what.
That's what I'm guiding in the Swan or wherever, and it's freeze thaw, rain, freeze thaw. Yeah. If I find a track, I need to catch it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody just paid a lot of money to go on a hunt, and I might not get a good perfect day, so I have to have something, And then, we're kind of lucky, Casey, is when the snow goes away, we got the whole forest. Yeah. And just road dogs, dirt, and catch most days.
Yeah,
and that makes it fun.
Yeah,
yeah, and that's kind of the fun thing about having a cold-nosed dog out here is when the snow goes, everybody else goes. Casey's out, I'm out. Yeah. And there's a few other local houndsmen that push hard. But for the most part, when the snow's not here, nobody's going to try.
Yeah, and it's not dry ground. It's just bare ground.
It's bare ground and it's frozen ground, and it's but it's muddy by noon, and it just depends, and I ain't there's places that have tougher conditions for sure, and a different style of dog is going to be
different. It's different conditions.
But I don't care where you go, if you're in the desert or if you're in the rainforest or if you're in the snow country, they all have their own set of challenges.
Right.
And those dogs really have to learn to handle that particular challenge and excel at it. And if you talk to any of those guys, the Southwest guys, what I keep learning is, they're looking for consistency just like we are.
Right.
Just a consistent track, a track that was laid in a consistent environment.
Mm-hmm.
That environment can just be dust and can be consistently 80, 90. But that consistent environment is going to preserve that scent.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the transitions that become the challenges. Those guys, a lot of them guys hate it when they get an inch of snow, because it just means that they might get one quick, easy race, but then they're going to have slush and mud and slop, and they're going to lose the ability to cold trail until those conditions get consistent again.
Yeah, so I'll get your opinion on this. We've talked about it a few times, but a dog that grows up, every houndsman, we talked about different conditions. Yeah, some places are tougher or they have different challenges than other places, and I think that my theory is that a dog that has got drive, he's got brains, he's got those two things, wants to catch game. If he is given enough time in a certain area, if he's got that drive to do it, then he's going to figure it out. I mean, we imported dogs from Europe. We import them and we ship dogs to other areas. And sometimes they don't work out, but a lot of times they do.
Yeah.
Especially if you get them in the hounds of a houndsman that can see, just little glitches and little glimmers of hope. Sure. And then they take that and they polish that gem a little bit and give them that chance, then they can excel. But I think a lot of times, you sit there and it's like, dog coming from this part of the country will never make it here. I've never seen the one that
Sure.
would make it. But a true houndsman is a guy that can say, what he did right there was kind of neat. Let's see if we can do that again and develop that in them.
Yeah, and there may be different tools you need in your toolbox for different real estate, but it was a good learning experience for me. The summer I was working down there in the Four Corners area in Utah. I was able to pursue up there in the San Juans.
Oh, you were way down there then.
Yeah.
You weren't in northern Utah. You were down in the...
And I did spend quite a bit of time up in the northern corner, too,
mm-hmm.
just below the Uinta Mountains. I built a house up there also, so I got both corners of it. But we were down there in the San Juans, and then we went up and hunted in La Salles and stuff. And, that was an eye-opener for me. There's a ton of houndsmen during their spring training, especially. A lot of guys travel in, put in camps up there. So there's guys. There were big camps everywhere. That was a big shocker to me. But man, I just thought that my dogs were no good after 2 weeks of driving that country. I know there's bears in here, and I couldn't get a strike. And I started hiking some ridges, and we finally got a couple started, and then I ended up bumping one day in with a local kid there that let me tag along, and his dogs just caught a bear, and I kicked a couple in there that kind of came in late, and then the next while there we started catching, but there was a big time period for me to get those dogs acclimated, and they had the year before, I've been fortunate enough to draw non-resident in Idaho quite a few years, and it seems like not every year, but I had gone from that same set of dogs, had just done a tremendous dog in this kind of type of climate in North Idaho, Montana, like I hunt, and then gone down there, and man, they looked like a bunch of pot lickers for a while.
Yeah,
but they came around, they came around and did good.
Exactly,
So.
And just to kind of draw a perspective on this thing. You can take I know several accomplished whitetail hunters from Indiana that if you brought them out here, the first year they hunt in the West, they have marginal success, but the more time they spend here,
yeah,
the more they learn it. And I'm not trying to say that dogs and people are alike or anything like that,
yeah.
but a bear, it's that minuscule, how much scent do I need to strike a bear? When I'm in Montana, boom, I can smell it. Or, a lion track, boom, I can smell it. It's not dry ground, it's bare ground. Sure. There's more moisture in it. They don't need as much scent. But if you take them and you put them in that environment long enough, and you show them that there's actually a lion, they start figuring that out, and they start thinking, hey, yeah, this is a fresh track right here. It doesn't smell like a fresh track in Montana, but for the Four Corners, that's a fresh track, and I'm going to run it. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to catch it.
Yeah, and that...
Do you think, is that your experience?
Absolutely, and I think that goes back to that excitability. I really feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm way off base, but my perception of a lot of what we call cold nose is an ability for those dogs to stay committed or excited about a minuscule amount of scent.
Yes.
And continue to work with that minuscule amount of scent and maintain that excitement level where they feel like they're going to do something with it.
Yeah.
And so, the actual process that each individual dog can out of those 5 dogs, they probably all know it's there.
Yeah.
If they pay attention to it, but it doesn't mean that they're gonna think that I can get something done with it.
A blue tick's nasal plane, they're not that much different if they were born and raised in the Four Corners than they are if they're born and raised in Northwest Montana or Indiana.
Right.
It's going to be the same. If you took it and dissected it, you could count the ridges in there. They're going to be very, very, very similar to the point that you or I can't tell the difference. Yeah. It's what they do with it between the time that scent comes in that nose, processes through the olfactory senses, and how that registers in their brain.
Yep.
And then it goes right to their heart and makes them think, I need to catch it.
Absolutely. And then, and with that, I really, this is kind of conversation back to the wolves a little bit, but after getting wolf hit a few times, I quit running old stuff. But really, the old cold trailing really never was I wouldn't say the link between having accidents with wolves. It's just kind of one of those things. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I kind of got to where I didn't really want to have dogs out cold trailing for 6 to 8 hours. And I just started changing the way and I kind of quit that and I went back to just hunting. If they wanted to take it, I'd let them take it, because I really felt like I was going to lose that aspect in my dogs if I wasn't testing them in their ability to cold trail or their desire to cold trail, and I felt like even genetically and everything else, it's imperative that I maintain that skill set. So I worked with them, but because I didn't do that for a while, I actually had a few dogs that they did get better with time. But since they were 2-3-year-old dogs that I hadn't really done a lot of cold trailing with, I mean, a little bit, they just have to cold trail in some poor situations once in a while, but I wasn't really intentionally driving them on it. And those same dogs, once I made them work hard at those bad tracks, they came around. So I really believe cold trailing is a taught discipline as much as it is, they gotta find success working with a terrible track, and even if it takes all day, at the end of that day, tomorrow they're going to work just as hard on the next time they have port, because there's hope. They know that there's something at the end of this, and if they've never been forced to do that, and every time they can't work with the track, they come back, he throws them in the box and moves on to the better track. They get to where they are lazy with minimum skill amounts of spent.
What's your experience, Larry? What do you think?
No, I agree 100%. And I kind of went through that same curve as he's talking about. Like, after seeing his dog get smacked by wolves, it's like, wow, that's ugly. I don't want to see that ever again. So it's like, well, this track was probably 24 hours old, but maybe there's one 10 minutes old up the hill.
Yeah.
So you drive up, here's 10-minute old track. I'll just catch this one real quick.
Yeah.
And then finally, guiding, so my dogs kind of got lazy on these tracks, but I got a client that wants to catch this cat now.
Yeah.
So the only way we're going to get it is if I walk the track out, because I didn't do my part and made that dog work. So now I got to do the dog work because I failed my dogs. But
they came around.
And they come around. But when you see the hounds get smashed, it'll leave an imprint.
Yeah. You know, tying it back to even going back east, you know, I can turn a dog loose down a little ditch between two cornfields. And that dog's going to shoot out there 100 yards, and he's going to probably strike a coon track. But if I want a dog that's going to throw dirt in my face, get gone in the dark, and go find a coon, then I got to put him in situations where he's not going to find a coon track real easy.
Sure.
You know, so it's the same thing, whether it's lion hunting here or coon hunting back east. If you've got to challenge those dogs. You can't always just put them right on top of it. You can treat coons with a mediocre dog all day long, or a lion with a mediocre dog all day long, but that doesn't mean you have a great hound. You know, can that dog tree him in adverse condition? Can they tree him in a snowstorm? Can they do it after it just got done pouring down rain, when it hadn't rained for 3 months? You know, you get a dog like that, but it's our responsibility as houndsmen to put those situations in front of them. You know, a lot of times it's frozen bean field. It's 600 yards to the woods. That dog's got to get there. You know, he's not going to tree it in the middle of that bean field. If I only turn loose on coons that I see crossing the road, then, you know what, that's not preparing or getting the most out of that hound and tapping into all that ability. And that's what separates a guy that's a hunter from a houndsman, really. You know, knowing what your dogs need and not being afraid to put the work in to get them there, because you're not going to have high success rates when you first start it. You know, I don't know. It sounds like you probably do the same thing that I do. I'll see things in dogs and it's like, man, I need to work on this. So I'll specifically look for situations where I can put them in that situation. And it can be a frustrating thing.
Oh yeah, and I think, you know, I can look back to, and I think so many of my good dogs have always been good in spite of me. You know, I mean, you look at the learning curve that goes into it, and you're just always learning something and wishing, but hopefully you're making changes, and you're setting things up better so that your pups that you got right now aren't going to maybe have to walk through that same struggle that you put in because of your poor training, put into those, you know, another dog that took a while to get to that point.
Yeah.
But patience to me has been my best friend in training hounds, and
isn't that something?
And you know, I wasn't always super patient, but every time I have been, it's always paid off. And so I'm more patient now, which brings back another topic though. Genetically speaking, you know, nobody wants a dog they got to wait on. And so you're still always looking for those early starting, real natural, go get it done dogs.
Right.
I'm not even saying that, you know, that's the goal, but with quirks and challenges and struggles, you know, most of the time, if you just are consistent and you keep with it and keep putting those dogs in circumstances they can succeed at, and you throw a lot of patience in there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
that seems to be the most common thing when I talk to accomplished houndsmen. You know, when they've reached that level where, you know, you can say that they're a houndsman, is patience. You know, and patience is such a key to training dogs. I know when I started, I probably kicked a lot of dogs to the curb and called dogs that probably would have made pretty good dogs just because I wasn't patient enough.
Yeah.
You know, sent them down the road, and I've seen dogs that I sent down the road that somebody else turned into a nice hound.
Yeah.
And it's like, why couldn't I do that?
Yeah.
Why didn't I do that? You know, can I buy it back? No. You know,
well,
no, I like him real well.
And another side of that, you know, I have a lot of individual dogs that I know would be better in somebody else's yard, and that's a tough thing because
I know one like that.
Yeah, because of the way they hunt, you know, I keep quite a few dogs around, and for me, I'm always putting time into what's going to be the future of the bloodline, you know, and so I might have an individual that's going to be a great individual, but maybe there's something that they're not going to get. I'm not going to breed to that individual, so I might hunt him still, keep him around, but he doesn't get the attention, you know, that the other ones that I'm trying to prove out before they go in the breeding pen are going to get, And plus, they all have to take turns somewhat.
Identify something that's a great dog that gets it done in the woods, but doesn't cut it for the breeding pen.
And it may just be looks. It might be a mouth. I've had a few dogs that just had just terrible, squally chopped mouths on them, and that's not what I try to produce. And and that may be stupid. Maybe someday I'll look back and say, gosh, we should have just bred to that dog. But I don't want to have a yard full of dogs that sound like that in the future. And voice used to be a big thing. Everybody wanted to know what kind of voice your dogs had,
Yeah.
It's pretty funny. The guys, especially guys that have started and never ran hounds without any tracking equipment, they don't even think about the voice. They care less what it sounds like.
Right.
And I was blessed with a dog with a giant mouth as my first dog. And there's no way on earth that I would have been able to. I probably would have quit if I wouldn't have had that dog, because I could just always find him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was real consistent to boot, and stayed treed. But he, it really impressed upon me still the value in keeping in the gene pool good mouths. Mm-hmm. And it's possible. That's the whole thing. It's not like you have to super compromise. But out of a litter, I might have two, and I'm going to pick that one with the better mouth if they're comparable in every other aspect. I like listening to my hounds, so that matters to me.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but something like that. But because I have a lot of dogs, they end up taking turns. And so the next guy who owns 4 hounds, he's going to kick loose all 4 of them dogs every day. And, those dogs are going to get way more time on the ground than if I've got, say, I'm rotating between 12 or something. They just have to take turns.
Yeah.
And I tend to run too many dogs on tracks because of that same reason. I'm trying to get as much out of each track as I can, and that is sometimes a big detriment to an individual that needed that track all to themselves today.
Yeah. What you're describing, I think, is probably the simplest way. Is when I turned 16, I just wanted a car that would go down the road,
right,
and get me from point A to point B. And then I went to, if I took the muffler off this truck and put a straight pipe on it, it'd sound really good.
Yeah.
And then it got into, I didn't follow through, but then you see people that really became gearheads, and now they want this sort of cam travel and this, all these different things, and so it's like what you're describing is you don't just want a dog that puts a lion in the tree. You want them to do it the way you want them to do it.
Right. Back to that though, I have a great appreciation for the real discerning breeders out there of their struggles. And they get a lot. It's easy for the guy who's got 2 hounds and hunts the wheels off of them to criticize the breeder who has more dogs than he really can hunt, and a lot of those dogs might not ever reach their complete full potential because they're pregnant some of their life. I have individual. You end up having males that I can't risk losing this male. He's too good. He's 3 years old and catches anything with hair on it. And I have to get pups out of him, prove those pups out of him out of certain crosses before I risk losing that dog. And with the wolves, and if you're hunting in rough bear country or anything else, you'll start getting careful with that individual.
100%.
And he's the best dog you've ever owned, and yet you're not kicking him loose. And a lot of houndsmen can't understand that. They're like, why on earth would you have a hound that good and he's not good enough to go hunting? You're just like, and so the struggle so I have a great appreciation for the breeders of the past and the present that have truly, made those sacrifices, because they're sacrifices. When the best dog you've ever looked at and you had to leave him home today and take his pups, it's not that you don't enjoy it today, but there's no dog in the world that wants to go more than that dog.
Right.
And so that takes a lot more. It takes a lot more strength than you'd think to leave him in the kennel.
Because if you lose him, you've lost a lot.
It may be irreplaceable genetically.
Yeah.
Depending on what you have.
And we're talking about a lot of, because we're in Northwest Montana, but every place has got its hazards.
Absolutely.
Mike Colley lost a dog to an alligator.
Yeah.
In Louisiana a couple months ago.
The highways are everywhere.
Highways. I run risk every time I turn a dog loose to it crossing the road and getting smacked. I've had one hit, but.
We hunt around some railroads,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. There's and just health issues, and just
we don't know.
Freak
you
accidents
go out there and how many stories do you hear about? I thought the dog was healthy. I go out there the next day and it was dead in the kennel.
Yep. There's always tragedies that happen.
Yep. If
you spend enough time doing it, but you control all that you can, and the things you can't control, you have to let it go too.
Yeah.
But I guess I've had a great appreciation for a lot of those breeders of the past and those guys that I'm fortunate enough to have, those dogs running through the veins of my dogs, of those guys that were discerning and did what it took to make crosses happen, even though it was expensive and it didn't make sense and it was difficult. And then it doesn't all just come easy, and so I think it's important that guys give some credit back to those old whoever built up whatever it is that you're hunting. Be thankful for it and do your best with it, but don't think you're an island on yourself and that you've plucked this out of thin air and the magic water out of your yard is somehow better than the magic water out of somebody else's.
Yeah, it's easy to be the king when you're the only one on the island.
There you go. Yep. So but yeah, you do get too picky, just like you're saying sometimes,
Yep.
But the adverse of that is 15 years down the road, 25 years down the road, those dogs aren't going to resemble what your standard was when what you started with. So you kind of got to be picky. But
well, to kind of wrap this thing up, Casey, I'm just curious, what advice would you give to houndsmen, to young people who are trying to strive to become houndsmen? Just because you've got a dog box and a dog in the box doesn't make you a houndsman.
Yeah.
What's something, a piece of advice or something you want to tell the young aspiring hunters out there that want to get into hounds? Besides, don't do it.
Right. I was going to say that's the one thing I think most people might say, but I would say be humble and learn anything you can from whoever you can, and then hunt the wheels off them.
Yeah.
It's you'll learn more from them dogs than any other way. So it's not an easy education, but it's the best one. So,
Larry, what do you got to tell them?
Yeah, I agree with Casey. Just work your butt off. Spend a lot of time in the woods. Bring your chains, snow shovels, pack a lunch.
Yep.
Just go out there and give her and enjoy God's creation, and He put it out there for us to use. So
get after it. Yep.
For sure.
Don't be afraid to ride in the truck with Larry Anderson.
That's right. Yep. Maybe keep one hand on the door, but
exactly.
No. No. But it's truly been something that's blessed my life, but.
You think about it. That's an interesting thing. The opportunities that I've had in my life because I became involved in hounds.
Yep.
Hunting places that most people have never seen. People get in their cars and they drive down the interstate and they say, "Oh, those mountains are beautiful," but they're never up in those places. Where you can look back down and look across. Those experiences, and not only the experiences and the places, but the people that you get to meet.
Absolutely, and I think getting to spend most of those times in those places with my kids and my wife, and we all hunt together. My boys hunt with me all the time, and my daughters too, and so it's even extra special when you're in them places with people you love and or a good hunting partner, and you got two faithful hounds sitting by you,
right,
following you out of the woods at night. It truly is it's an easy way to romanticize it, I suppose, but
that's right.
But it truly is that way. I think that's what keeps all of us so crazy about it.
Yeah. Well, any final thoughts, Larry?
No.
Summed it up.
Yeah. Summed it up.
Just sitting over there breathing in the mic and
just breathing in the mic.
Yeah.
No.
Got any final thoughts, Casey?
I don't think so, man.
Summed it up, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to come down here and talk as talk to us. And
yeah.
Tell us about mountain lion studies and hunting in northwest Montana and
it's
helicopter logging and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, we get to do a little everything, I suppose. We're grateful for it.
Yeah.
So appreciate the chance and
all right, Casey. Well, I'm going to wrap this thing up, and we wrap it up the same way every time. So we may not hunt dogs that look alike. We may want things out of, different things out of our hounds, but you follow your hounds and I'll follow mine.